For decades, Mr. Bean's quiet, wide-eyed creation shuffled through life with that odd little walk, that puzzled stare, and a kind of mischief that felt almost otherworldly. And now, as he turns 70, the man behind Mr. Bean has finally broken the silence, offering a playful hint that confirms what fans have whispered for years. Rowan Sebastian Atkinson entered the world on a cold January morning in the year 1955, in the industrial town of Consett in County Durham. He was the youngest of 4 boys, born to Eric and Ella Atkinson. His father worked as a company director at a farm machinery firm, a steady and practical man, while his mother managed the home with a warm but firm touch. Life in the Atkinson household was simple, steady, and full of the usual noise that came with raising a group of brothers who were always competing, always teasing, and always finding ways to entertain themselves. Rowan, however, often slipped into the background. From the very beginning, family members described him as the quiet one, the observer, the boy with large eyes who watched everything but said very little. When he did speak, there was a slight hesitation, a soft stumble in his words. It was not severe, and it was not something that kept him from interacting with people, but it made him cautious. Anyone who has ever struggled to get a word out in front of others knows that those small pauses can feel like mountains. At Durham Chorister School, where he was first enrolled, Rowan kept mostly to himself. He preferred books, drawings, and tinkering with small mechanical things. Even at that age, he was fascinated with how things worked. He enjoyed taking apart household objects and putting them back together, sometimes successfully and sometimes with parts mysteriously left behind. He was never the loudest boy in the room, never the joker, never the confident voice in group discussions, but he had a certain charm, something you only noticed if you paid attention to the little details. His face could shift from completely serious to unexpectedly funny in an instant. A raised brow, a widened eye, a strange little expression. It was not yet comedy, not yet a performance, but the seed was there, waiting for the right place to grow. When Rowan moved on to St. Bees School in Cumbria, the quietness stayed with him. He was extremely bright in science and mathematics, and he often earned high marks in those subjects, although not everybody around him realized how capable he was. He lacked the loud confidence people often confuse with brilliance. His stutter was still present, and though he managed it well, it sometimes made him withdraw even further. Rowan's stutter seemed to vanish whenever he stepped on stage. It was as though something clicked when he performed, as if he found a world where the hesitation of everyday speech no longer held him back. Rowan himself admitted in later interviews that he was painfully shy as a teenager. He never imagined himself becoming a performer. He certainly never pictured a future where millions of people around the world would know him, laugh at his work, and study his characters as if they were figures in a textbook. He thought he would become an engineer. That was the plan. That was the safe, sensible path laid out in front of him. After completing his A-levels in science, he moved on to Newcastle University to study electrical and electronic engineering. This was no small decision. Engineering is a demanding field, and Rowan took it seriously. University life opened him up just a little more. He met new people, found himself in new social circles, and slowly discovered that he had a gift that others did not. The ability to make people laugh without saying a single word. A simple look, a well-timed expression, a physical reaction that carried more meaning than a whole paragraph. Toward the end of his degree, Rowan's interest in performing began to grow. He found himself drawn toward the university's review groups, The small gatherings where students put on comedic sketches, songs, and short plays. At first, he simply watched. Then, he tried participating. The more he stepped into the light of the stage, the less his stutter disturbed him. It was as if performing unlocked some part of him he had been hiding all his life. He was still quiet in the real world, still shy, still thoughtful. But in front of an audience, he found a different kind of voice. A voice that did not rely on words. Nobody discouraged his interest in performance, but they all assumed engineering would be his future. Rowan himself believed the same thing. Even when he applied for a master's program at the Queen's College, Oxford, he did so with the intention of becoming an engineer. He imagined designing machines, solving complex technical problems, and leading a calm, predictable life. Oxford, however, changed everything. He joined the Oxford University Dramatic Society and the Oxford Review, where he met Richard Curtis, a young writer who would later become one of his closest collaborators, and Howard Goodall, a talented musician and composer. These friendships would shape the entire course of his life. Rowan began performing in sketches, refining his physical comedy, twisting his face into unbelievable shapes, and gradually discovering a style that felt natural to him. People who saw him perform in those early days would later describe the same thing. The shock of seeing someone so quiet explode into unexpected energy. He was fearless on stage, even though he was timid everywhere else. The stutter that had shadowed him since childhood almost disappeared. It was not cured, but it lost its power over him. On stage, Rowan was free. His childhood and teenage years had built a strange foundation. A shy boy who rarely spoke. A stutter that held him back in the real world but faded during performance. An engineer at heart who secretly carried the spirit of a comedian. All these contradictions came together in Oxford, shaping a life that would soon surprise everyone, including Rowan himself. What he did not know then was that this quiet, self-observing young man was walking toward one of the most iconic comedy careers in history. And the quiet stutter that once made him hold back would one day help him create a character who barely spoke at all, yet made the whole world laugh. When Rowan Atkinson arrived at the Queen's College, Oxford, he intended to focus on engineering. Yet beneath that calm, studious exterior, something else was quietly growing. It began almost casually. He joined the Oxford University Dramatic Society, then the Oxford Review, a group famous for producing smart, witty comedy. One minute he was quiet, almost invisible, and the next he was a force of pure comedic energy. In these early reviews, he met two people who would change his life forever. Richard Curtis, the sharp and imaginative writer, and Howard Goodall, the talented composer with a gift for rhythm and mood. The three young men quickly formed a creative friendship that felt effortless. Rowan brought the physical comedy, Richard brought the clever words, and Howard brought the musical heartbeat. Together, they began shaping sketches that blended intelligence with absurdity and gave Rowan the freedom to experiment with every twitch of his face and every unexpected pause of his body. These student performances soon took them beyond the walls of Oxford. They traveled to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe in the mid-1970s, the same festival that launched many of Britain's beloved performers. The crowds there were different. They were louder, more demanding, and far more honest than university audiences. But once Rowan stepped under the stage lights, something extraordinary always happened. His presence swallowed the room. People who had never heard him speak a full sentence before would find themselves holding their breath as he built a moment with nothing but a look. His stutter never followed him into these performances. it stayed behind the curtain, powerless. By the late 1970s, Rowan felt confident enough to try professional work. His first major step came in the world of radio. In 1978, he worked on a satirical program for BBC Radio 3 called The Atkinson People. It was an unusual and clever show, built around imaginary interviews with fictional characters. The series allowed Rowan to perform multiple voices, experiment with timing, and polish the unique comedic rhythm he was known for. The show introduced him to listeners who had never seen his face but could feel the odd magic in his delivery. The radio's little success opened the door to television. In 1979, Rowan joined the cast of Not the 9 O'Clock News, a groundbreaking sketch show that mixed sharp political humor with silly physical comedy. It became one of the most talked about programs on British television. Audiences loved the young new performer with the expressive eyebrows and the unpredictable timing. Producers began to recognize that there was something entirely original about him. He could twist his body into impossible shapes, create comedy out of silence, and stand completely still while making people laugh harder than any punchline ever could. During this period, Rowan began to understand that comedy was more than a hobby. It was a language he spoke fluently, even more fluently than he spoke in real life. This was the moment his career truly began. The university reviews had uncovered his voice. The radio work sharpened it. The television sketches launched it into the world. And Rowan himself finally realized that the thing he once treated as a small, private escape was actually his true path forward. Everything that came later, all the fame, all the unforgettable characters, and all the global recognition began with those first steps onto small stages in Oxford. Rowan Atkinson's rise to national recognition did not happen overnight. It unfolded little by little, each success shaped by his growing confidence and the support of the collaborators he met during his university years. After the success of Not the 9 O'Clock News, people in the British entertainment world began to notice the tall, expressive young man with the sharp features and sharper comedic instincts. He had a style unlike anyone else. That unique blend caught the attention of producers and writers, including Richard Curtis and Howard Goodall, who were already working closely with him. They understood his rhythm, his timing, and his strange ability to hold an audience still with nothing more than a raised eyebrow. Together, the three of them developed what would become one of the most celebrated British comedies of all time, Blackadder. The first series of Blackadder aired in 1983. It was set in the medieval period, with Rowan playing Prince Edmund, also known as the Black Adder. This early version of the character was loud, dramatic, and a bit foolish, very different from the sharper and more sarcastic forms he would take later. Although the first series received mixed reactions, it laid the foundation for something that would soon become iconic. Rowan and Curtis, along with writer Ben Elton, reworked the idea, sharpening the comedy and shifting the tone. When Blackadder returned with the second series, everything changed. Blackadder 2 arrived with a fresh identity. Set during the Elizabethan era, it introduced a new version of Edmund Blackadder who was smarter, quicker, and more cunning. His dry wit, sly insults, and perfectly controlled expressions made him unforgettable. The chemistry between Rowan and his co-star Tony Robinson, who played Baldric, created a duo that audiences adored. Each new series moved to a different historical period, and with each move, Rowan showed how versatile he truly was. The success of Blackadder was more than comedic luck. By the mid-1980s, Rowan had become a household name in Britain, and his work was finding its way into other corners of the entertainment world. During this time, Rowan also explored film roles. One of his earliest appearances on the big screen was in the James Bond film Never Say Never Again in 1983. He played a nervous and inexperienced Foreign Office official named Nigel Small Fawcett, a role that allowed him to test his comedic instincts within a more serious setting. As the 80s continued, Rowan balanced television, theater, and film with ease. In 1981, he made history by becoming the youngest performer to present a solo show in London's West End. This achievement said something important about him. Even without an ensemble cast, he could hold an audience for an entire evening. His one-man show mixed physical comedy with sharp sketches, showcasing not only his inventiveness, but also his dedication to craft. The versatility he displayed during this era played a crucial role in shaping his public identity. Some comedians are known for one style, one tone, or one famous character. Rowan was different. He could perform witty verbal comedy, silent physical humor, or dramatic scenes with equal strength. By the end of the decade, it was clear that Rowan Atkinson was evolving into one of Britain's most original comedic voices. He did not know it yet, but the character that would make him a worldwide icon was waiting in the wings. All the skills he had perfected through years of sketch comedy, stage performance, and television work were preparing him for the role that would take his fame beyond borders and beyond language. The world was about to meet Mr. Bean. When Rowan Atkinson first introduced Mr. Bean to the world, the comedy landscape shifted in a way no one quite expected. It was the winter of 1990, and British television was crowded with loud jokes, fast-paced dialogue, and the familiar rhythm of stand-up punchlines. Then came this quiet, peculiar man in a tweed jacket, blinking at the world as if everything needed to be solved with a sideways glance and an overactive imagination. And almost instantly, audiences leaned in. Mr. Bean wasn't built on witty lines or clever conversations. In fact, he barely spoke at all. Rowan crafted him as a character driven almost completely by physical expression. Part child, part troublemaker, part outsider, observing the world from a slightly crooked angle. His humor drew from simple, everyday situations. Going to the swimming pool, preparing for a holiday, sitting an exam. Things that most people experience without drama suddenly erupted into chaotic genius in Mr. Bean's hands. It was obvious right away that Rowan was pulling from a deep well of inspiration, especially the legendary French filmmaker and comedian Jacques Tati, whose character, Monsieur Hulot, relied heavily on body language, silence, and an almost musical sense of timing. But Rowan didn't simply imitate those influences. He molded them into something unmistakably his own. Mr. Bean became a kind of universal comic language, spoken not with words, but with movement. And that was what made him Mr. Bean, because you didn't need to understand English to understand Mr. Bean. You just needed to recognize the simple, hilarious awkwardness of being human. The show ran from 1990 to 1995, but its impact spread far beyond that short window. As the episodes traveled across continents, Mr. Bean became one of the few television characters recognized almost anywhere he appeared. He was the stranger you somehow felt you'd known all your life. People watched him on old box TVs, on fuzzy hotel screens, in waiting rooms, in countries where British comedy had never really taken hold before. And they laughed, really laughed. That wave of global attention led to films like Bean in 1997 and Mr. Bean's Holiday in 2007, which pushed the character into new adventures without losing that essential spirit. Even animated adaptations followed, allowing Mr. Bean to live in a world where real-world logic no longer had to apply. And through all of this, Rowan kept the mystery alive. He never over-explained the character, never talked too much about Bean's background or motivations. Sometimes, the less you know, the stronger the magic becomes. Behind the scenes, Rowan's own life was evolving just as quickly. In 1990, he married Sunetra Sastry, a makeup artist he had met during the early years of Blackadder. Their partnership was quiet and steady, and together they raised 2 children. For all the noise that fame can bring, Rowan always shielded his family life from the spotlight, keeping the chaos of celebrity far from the peace of his home. Years later, after the couple grew apart and eventually divorced around 2015, Rowan found companionship again with actress Louise Ford. Their daughter, born in 2017, added a new chapter to his life, one less public, more centered around warmth and family than ever. Unlike Mr. Bean, who famously rattled around in that tiny lime green Mini, Rowan's real-life garage was filled with the machines he adored. Sleek, powerful, beautifully engineered vehicles. He earned his lorry license, took part in amateur car racing, and became deeply involved in the world of automotive engineering and performance. In interviews, he often spoke about cars with the same passion and attention to detail that he brought to comedy. It wasn't just a hobby, it was another language he spoke fluently. And in that contrast, you could see the full complexity of the man behind the character. One side powered by playfulness, the other shaped by logic and quiet determination. Turning 70 is a milestone for anyone, but for Rowan Atkinson, it feels like the moment the world finally pauses to take stock of everything he has given to comedy. It's remarkable to look back and think about where it all began. A shy boy from County Durham with a soft stutter, who never seemed destined for global fame. He had the grades to be an engineer, the seriousness of a scientist, and the quietness of someone who might have blended into the background. But every time he stepped on a stage, something unlocked. That same spark carried him through university reviews, radio sketches, West End shows, and the iconic run of Blackadder, all building toward the moment he introduced the world to Mr. Bean. And through everything, Rowan has maintained an unusual kind of legacy, one shaped not just by characters, but by consistency. His work is studied in comedy schools. His timing is referenced by actors twice his age. And this is where the final twist comes in. The one fans have whispered about for years, the idea that Mr. Bean might not actually be human. It started as a joke, a playful hint buried in the show's opening sequence. In several episodes, Mr. Bean appears falling from the sky in a beam of light, the way a creature might arrive from another world. He simply lands, dusts himself off, and begins causing confusion wherever he goes. No explanation, no backstory. Just this odd, unfamiliar man trying to make sense of everyday life. Over time, fans built theories, essays, and even short films about Bean being some kind of alien or visitor. The clues seem to fit. He struggles with basic social customs, he mimics others to blend in, he behaves as if observing humanity for the first time, and his problem-solving, creative, chaotic, absolutely unpredictable, feels strangely extraterrestrial. For years, Rowan stayed silent about these theories. He let audiences wonder and debate, which only made the idea grow stronger. But as he reached his 70th birthday, he finally allowed himself to smile at the myth. In a light-hearted reflection, he admitted that Mr. Bean was always meant to feel a bit alien. Not in the literal sense, but in the way he stands apart from the rules of everyday life. He is a stranger among familiar things, a visitor in a world he doesn't fully understand, a being who sees everything slightly off-center. And that's exactly why he is so funny. And maybe that's what people suspected all along. Not that Mr. Bean was truly from another planet, but that he was never meant to fit into the standard frames of reality. He existed between worlds, part cartoon, part mime, part human, part something entirely new. In the end, the legacy of Rowan Atkinson is not just about the characters he portrayed. The world is brighter, lighter, and far more interesting because Rowan Atkinson walked into it, blinked at it,